All right. All right. Wonderful. Getting ready to get started tonight. But again, welcome to another edition of Urban Logia Live. It is your friendly favorite neighborhood apologist, Damon Richardson, about to go in on a very controversial topic, much needed discussion. Hang in there with me while we take a second to let the audience build up. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Share this. Let people know if you're up watching some games or whatever it is. If you're still up tonight, join this conversation. You definitely don't want to miss it. Make sure you let people know on Facebook, Instagram, or wherever you're on social media that we are on live. Foundation of what you're building on is heresy, then it's a false house. All right, so we're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes, but thank you for all of you who have gotten on. You're already here, and make sure you shout out your city. Let us know where you're repping, and it's good to be back. Took a little hiatus, but it's good to be back. Good to see you, CP. I see you, richly redeemed. And who's that? Renee and Only. All right, wonderful. Blessings to you, LaChat, Christine, grace of God. So many of you are already on. Continue to let us know where you're watching from. Go ahead and rep your city. Drop that in the chat. Again, make sure you invite somebody into this conversation. We're going to get going here very quickly. Get underway. The night is it is late, but yet still a little bit early. And be reminded that clocks go back tonight as well. So we will be losing an hour. And but that's not going to stop us from getting to church in the morning, right? So, all right. Well, this is a conversation we need to have. We're up to about 36 people. Let's keep getting that number up. Make sure you let people know that we are on tonight. But I want to have this conversation. I have waited a little bit to see how things would unfold. And day by day, things are obviously getting worse with Nike, of course, not renewing Kyrie's contract, and with the release of the Kyrie 8s, and just many other people, again, sponsors jumping off ship, and a whole lot of talk around social media about anti-Semitism, what it is, what it isn't, whether these guys are getting, a raw deal, whether they're getting shafted, whether they're being done wrong. There's a whole lot of conversation going on about it. And so tonight, what I want to really do is have a broad conversation, not only about anti-Semitism, but about racism, about their particular situation, and to unravel this whole thing, dealing with both of them, more particularly Kanye West and Kyrie Irving. And so let's talk tonight. I think this will be a very helpful conversation to really getting down into what the issues are, what the issues aren't, and also addressing some of the things that I hear and have read Christians saying in their post. And so I think it's really important because a lot of this does brush up against what we have been talking about in terms of urban apologetics. And so there's a lot of unpacking to do here. There's a lot of layers to this conversation, and I want to do the best that I can to really get this unpacked and to put this conversation out so that we can have it together. And of course, we'll do the typical Q&A. And so let's make it happen. It's a Saturday night, and I'm feeling pretty good. And let's do it. So let's talk about it tonight. Kanye and Kyrie and the whole issue of anti-Semitism. And so just before we not just before we get started. In getting started, I think it's important to create as we do with anything, context, right? So we've got to have context around the conversation, which means that we can't assume that everybody knows what has happened or what's taken place. And so I'll run down just a brief summary of what's transpired over the last couple of weeks as it relates to these two, right? And then we'll bring the conversation forward. So going back, since we've got two persons involved, let's talk about Kanye West first. So a couple of weeks ago, Kanye um, was I should say it like this. A lot of this started with the with his fashion show and the fact that he had essentially White Lives T-shirts, partnering up with the infamous Candace Owens, and of course, behind the scenes, there's supposed to be some deal where Kanye is supposed to be buying Parlor, the social media app from Candace's husband. So, so she's essentially going to bat for anything that Kanye says or does or whatever. It seems just like it's, well, as it would seem, it's pretty convenient. And, but nonetheless, they both seem to hold very controversial and outlier positions as it relates to things like social justice, so forth and so on. Nothing really surprising about that, but they had T-shirts on that said "White Lives Matter." We won't get into the conversation about that, but that's absolutely ridiculous. That is absurd, to be quite clear. And there was a lot of statements made about how wrong that was. One of the statements that was made by uh, P. Diddy, or Diddy, as he refers to himself, where he essentially called Kanye out, saying, "Hey, listen, long story short, it's not cool, man. It's wrong, and you need to stop that. Whether it's about your fashion show, marketing, or whatever, that's just plain wrong, right? Black lives do matter. The statement was made for a reason. It's obviously not to say that other lives don't matter, but to emphasize the fact that Black lives do." He makes his statement, and Kanye essentially responds to P. Diddy with this notion that I know the Jews sent you and they put you up to making this statement and this, that, or the other. They control the media, all of this kind of stuff, right? And so that started it, because now he's not only did he essentially make these T-shirts, which really the T-shirts are an example of racism, right? Racist trope, racist thought, and ideology. But now he's moving from just that to this whole notion about the Jewish controlled media and the Jewish controlled, um, you know, music industry and all this other stuff. So he involves that in his response to P. Diddy. And so then he appears on the podcast with Nore, Drink Champs. And he goes into even more of that conversation, essentially going even further about how the Jews control the Jewish mafia. They control people, they control the music going out, and that whole trope, right? And I won't get into every statement that he made, but essentially that's what he was talking about. The Jews control this, the Jews control that. They, music industry, politics, so forth and so on. Um, and they're essentially taking over, making sure that you can't say this, you can't do that, or whatever. Watch out. And he even, of course, references Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam, right? So again, I'm just kind of giving you the Cliff Notes version of it, not necessarily verbatim their statements, just to help you kind of understand what's going on. And so from there, Adidas dropped their sponsorship, their partnership, not sponsorship, but their partnership with him causing him to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. I think it was to the tune of somewhere around 400 million or more, almost instantly. Excuse me. Other people began to back away from Kanye, um, and so he went from essentially being a billionaire to being obviously a multimillionaire still. So still hundreds of millions of dollars, but whatever his worth is now, he's no longer in billionaire status as a result of that. So there was much talk about whether or not Adidas had the right to do that, whether or not they still owe him money, all of these different conversations, right? So there's a whole lot of talk on social media about, well, nobody said anything, nobody did anything when he had the White Lives Matter shirts, but as soon as you start talking about the Jews, bada bing, bada boom, and suddenly he's canceled, right? And so add Kyrie Irving in, who is again no stranger to making all kinds of controversial and ill-informed statements, Earth being flat, so forth and so on. Kanye makes a post of the link to a documentary on Negroes to Hebrews to Negroes. Hebrews to Negroes is the name of the documentary. The documentary essentially pushes the idea of the legitimacy of Black Hebrew Israelism. That is the idea that Africans or Black people from West Africa brought here in slavery are actually the true Jews. And so he makes a post about that. Doesn't really say anything, just kind of the link. And there's some statements made, some concern from the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. And Kanye seems to suggest that, yeah, you know what? Some things I agree with, some things I don't. But, hey, listen, if it'll help, I'll write a check for 500 thou along with the Brooklyn Nets, and we'll write these checks to obviously push the fight against hate and so forth and so on. So during the press conference, he was essentially the press conference was set up so that he would essentially denounce anti-Semitism, because that was a goal. They wanted to make sure that he was distancing himself from the anti-Semitic views in the documentary, right? And Kyrie stopped short of any kind of firm statement where he says he's not an anti-Semite. He doesn't say that he isn't. What he says is, "How could I be?" Essentially, the same statement that Kanye made. How could I be when I'm Semitic, right? How could I be? Uh, essentially the idea. How could I be anti-Semitic when Black people are the true Jews? Is the idea that he's leaning towards. So that is the same statement, of course, that Kanye essentially makes when to the charge of him being anti-Semitic, right? So at that point, the Brooklyn Nets decide, hey, listen, what we're going to do is disassociate ourselves from Kanye. We're going to suspend him for 5 days. Obviously, he's going to be fined. This, that, or the other. So again, social media explodes. There's all kinds of conversation, and there'll be in the chat as well conversation about y'all seeing this, y'all woke, y'all paying attention to what's going on, and I don't hear anything that he really said that was anti-Semitic, and just a whole lot of this going on. Christians, non-Christians. It's a conspiracy fest out there now, a conspiracy theory fest out there with these two situations going on, and people thinking that the fix is in, and we're being set up for a major conflict in the near future as it relates to um, black people getting canceled all over the place for speaking the truth, speaking out, so forth and so on. So, with all of that said, let's start separating the facts from the fiction, and let's start unraveling this so that we, as Christians, first and foremost, as Christians, since that's my primary audience, can know how to think about this. Right now, everybody's entitled to their own opinions, but you are not entitled to your own facts. Right. So let's start talking about it piece by piece. So let me start off by acknowledging the most obvious pieces here. What are the most obvious pieces? Well, number one, it is a fact that when things are often said about Black people or racist things are said and done that would offend Black people, for instance, in the music and these kinds of things, we don't always see corporations jumping on that bandwagon of, well, it's not okay if you say it about a Jew, but it's okay, if you're using the N word and the B word, and and applying that that type of misogyny towards Black women seems okay with the record executives and all these other things, as long as they're doing that and talking about that towards Black people. But the minute you say something about the Jew, oh, here it comes. This one's getting fired, that one's getting canceled, so forth and so on. There's a little bit of truth to that, but not entirely. There's a little bit of truth to that. Number one, one of the reasons why um, you don't see the kind of reaction to by corporations when it comes down to these things, um, as it relates to the Black community, racism, and so forth and so on. One of the reasons that you don't see a reaction from them is twofold. Number one, Black people are themselves not united around these issues. I want you to take all of the emotion out of this whole conversation and just think back with me. As soon as Kanye makes these statements, you got at least half of social media talking about how he's misunderstood and y'all don't really know what he's trying to do. And this is genius and this is brilliant, right? So oftentimes, I don't care what goes on. If it's offensive to Black people, as many Black people are doubling down on what they are not going to do as there are Black people standing up and saying, here's what I'm going to do. Let's say, for instance, the situation is, hey, you know what? We're going to boycott this. Well, you'll have as many Black people on social media talking about, I don't care what nobody says, I'm not going to do it. So you got to remember, businesses, corporations are in things for business. And so they look at that and they realize that at the end of the day, African Americans are still one of your number one consumers in America. And at the end of the day, Black people are not even divided. I mean, are not even united around some of the issues that, for instance, Jewish people would be united around. Like, there is absolutely no disagreement in their communities about what anti-Semitism is and about what actually offends them. But let somebody we like say something wrong, and as many of us are defending that person as there are people criticizing that person. Like, suddenly, the Nation of Islam and all these groups have something to say about, oh yeah, Kanye was right about what he said about the Jews. But where were they on the whole issue of his White Lives Matter t-shirt? I'll wait. I'll wait. I mean, I will actually wait. They weren't anywhere, right? So my part of the reason why there is a hesitancy to to cancel and to pull sponsorship and all these things is because the consumer base of African Americans are themselves not even united around what really offends us, what's completely intolerable, what we will have no more of, and what we won't support. At the end of the day, some of y'all on here were still talking about, I don't care what he said, Yeezys are comfortable to me. So I don't want to hear nothing later about other things. This is my point. Is that we are invalidating our own struggle when at the end of the day we put individualism and our own comforts above the plight of what really should be the collective whole or the masses. I know I'm right about that. I know I'm right about it 100%. So we cannot expect corporations to act in ways on our behalf when we ourselves have made up minds about, well, as long as I like this product or that product, I don't care who says what about Black people, I'm still going to support it. Well, guess what they're going to support? The almighty dollar, because that's what corporations do. They are for profit. That's what they do. So let's kill that whole narrative about, oh, they're willing to do it when it's the Jews, but not when it's us. We got to kill that whole narrative, because at the end of the day, when you know what were when the a couple of years ago when NFL, the whole issue, Colin Kaepernick, so forth and so on, what did you have? Some Black people standing, some Black people kneeling. Other Black people saying, man, this is a paycheck. This is my whole career. I can't afford to do that. So forth and so on. You had Black people divided over the issue. So my whole point is that it's unrealistic for us to expect the same kind of reaction when we react in a very uh, divided way over these very same issues. And at the end of the day, see, one of the worst things that ever happened to us as a result of racism was us losing this sense of collectivism. That's a value in African nations and even in Eastern cultures, collectivism. Well, we used to have that. We don't now, because it's to each his own, and everybody likes what they like what they like, and they don't like what they don't like. And at the end of the day, they really don't care about the collective whole. They have bought into this American value of individualism. Well, if we were ahead economically and if we were in a better place, well, individualism may not be so bad. But the wealth gap between us and everybody else is so large, it's not profitable for us to have an individualistic mindset. So it's very difficult for us to get together on issues like racism and issues like boycotts and pushing back against these kind of things, because we've got so many people with so many different ideas. And at the end of the day, this, I really don't care what the rest of y'all want to do. I like this product or I don't like that product. So that's one whole issue right there, is that you know we're too individualistic. Another issue, and I'm going to get to the whole anti-Semitism piece, but I need to say this. Another issue, there's this whole notion of, oh, there's this Jewish-controlled media industry and music industry. Fact of the matter is that the media industry and the music industry are no more Jewish controlled than they are white controlled. In fact, they are more white controlled than they are Jewish controlled. And that's not counting, of course, the Jews in both industries who would identify themselves as white because, of course, they are of European descent, as you know, Ashkenazi Jews are of European descent. So even if we were to take uh, that out of the equation, right, and we're just talking about we're talking about non-Jewish whites, well, there would be more in the music industry than there would in the media than there would be Jews, right? So where's that narrative? Like, where's that narrative? Why is it just the Jews? So there's not regular white men and women involved. Non-Jewish white men and women don't dominate those industries. I mean, they don't. I thought they did. So you can't make the one argument without making the other. And the reality is that it's more European non-Jewish dominated than it would be Jewish dominated anyway. So that's another aspect of that whole claim that is completely false. I'm gonna deal with the anti-Semitism in a minute. Another thing is this. Now, I know that there's a lot of indie artists, and that just makes the thing even worse. Let me break it down. Let me break it down. So, music industry, whether there's a lot of Jews involved as music execs, a lot of non-Jewish whites that are involved, so forth and so on. Here are the facts, though, about that. Because they say, oh yeah, they can make, they got us making this kind of music about killing ourselves and all of this other stuff and so forth and so on. The Jews got us doing this. No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. No, 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 they don't. Here's how I know. Number one. All right, buddy. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. All right. So, hey, somebody come get him, please. There you go. Somebody come get him. Put him in his cage. Thank you. All right. So they don't. And I'm going to tell you why. Number one, when it comes down to who buys hip hop, and I'm talking about commercially produced hip hop, when it comes down to who predominantly buys commercially produced hip hop, it's not African Americans, it's white suburban kids that are actually buying it, paying for the stream, so forth and so on, more so than African Americans are. So even if the argument could be made that they're pushing this kind of music so that it can sell, well, sell where? Because it's not selling in our communities. It might be playing in our community, but it's selling in theirs. So if we're really making that argument, then the argument logically would have to follow that Black violent hip hop is being made for white suburbans for their self-destruction. That's not a good argument. That's not a good argument. So the reality is that they're the ones buying it more than our kids are. So it can't be being made for our self-destruction when they're purchasing it. Record executives look at what sells. That's what they look at. What sells. Now, am I saying that there may not be some racism in there somewhere? I'm sure that there absolutely is. In every industry, systemically and structurally, racism is built into all of these systems in America. Absolutely. Not doubting that at all. But we can't act like the record executives got Black artists making this so that their records can sell without asking the question, sell to who? Because I mean, if you told me that Black people were the number one consumers in terms of purchase of these LPs, then I'd be like, yeah, man, this is poison. but white kids are buying it. So it can't follow that they're pushing this to be made for uh, our self destruction when their kids are the ones buying it. That's only one of the arguments. The other argument now speaks to this, is that you have as many, if not more, indie artists that are not signed with major labels. What they do is they make music, upload it to various platforms and even YouTube, and get paid by having so many streams or downloads or whatever. Right now, nobody's controlling them. They're 100% essentially in control of their dollars. So most of that music, for instance, let's take drill. None of that is being commercially produced. That's not on Sony. That's not on Rockefeller or whatever. That's not really being commercially produced. That kind of stuff is on YouTube. Person like King Von makes a song, and what happens? Like 50 million views or 100 million, 200 million views. And almost overnight, he becomes rich because he's getting paid by the view. And people watch it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And these videos and songs are monetized. He's not signed with a label. Boom, drops another song. Now his popularity, people are sharing. Same thing. Now he's flying all over the place, doing tours, doing concerts, this, that, or the other, and he's not going through. Now, so what's the excuse there? The record execs don't have a gun up to their head saying, make this kind of song, make that kind of song, say this, say B's, say N's, do this. Now, that 100%, almost 100% is being consumed by African Americans. That is being consumed by African Americans. Ain't no white man involved in that other than the payout. The monetization of it. Ain't no Jews involved in that other than the payout or whatever, the monetization. But the fact of the matter is that indie artists have moved all of the middlemen out of the way. They don't have any excuses about, well, the reason we feel like we got to make this kind of music is because this kind of music sells, this, that, the other. Listen, at the end of the day, it's a culture, that a subculture that we have created, that, again, with the individualized mindset, too many of us feel like, well, at the end of the day, if it gets me paid, I'm going to keep making this kind of drill. I'm going to keep talking about using all kinds of gun bars and talking about who I shot, who I killed, my blicky, and the ops and all this other stuff. Who's making African Americans do that? Who? Which Jew? See? So that's a dead argument as well. That's a dead argument as well. So my whole point is that what Kanye was saying about some Jewish controlled media, just from and record industry, is just false. And that doesn't mean that they don't have executives in the music industry. I mean, there are black executives in the music industry, but their presence in the music industry doesn't mean that they control it. No different than their presence in media means that they control it. Does it? Now, are there a lot of them in there? Well, I'm sure there are. But here's another thing that needs to be considered. Jewish people have generational values, right? Generational values that are very, very collective. Let me break this down to you. I don't care whether you're in LA, I don't care whether you're in Miami, New York, Israel, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Russia, Germany, I don't care where you are. You find community of Jews, you're going to find the same kinds of core values, whether they are religious Jews or even secular Jews. You're going to find some of the very same kinds of core values uh, that uh, that you're going to find anywhere else in the world. Right. So these are generational values that they have. One of the values that they have is called Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam, Tikkumolam, Tikkun Olam. It means the repairers of the world, and so the basic idea behind of a Tikkun Olam is this idea that when God created the world, He left enough of it broken so that people would be able to find their purpose in life towards that repair, right? So that whether that's true or not doesn't matter. It's a value that they have. So the fact of the matter is this: parents, Jewish parents, pretty much have already decided. Number one, that all their kids are going to college for the most part. They pretty much they're almost unanimous on that. And they've already decided what kind of career path. They're not going to school to for basket weaving or anything. They've pretty much determined that there's a number of fields that they push towards. Some of it is media, journalism, things like that. You're going to find that. You're going to find law and legal careers. You're going to find that path. You're going to find science and medical careers. When you look at how many Nobel Peace Prize recipients they have, and scientists and breakthrough inventors in various areas of technology. Well, there's a reason for that, and that's not because of conspiracy. It's because they send their kids to school for those kinds of careers. And so you're going to find them in a good handful of a certain kinds of careers because those are the kind that their parents push. Is that a conspiracy? No, that's their values. Who you going to fault them for that? In fact, I remember one year I was living in New York at the time, and I remember reading, I believe it was in the Daily News. It was in the Daily News. There was a story about um there was a story about Yeshiva University. This is a Jewish university in New York City. And of course, they've got sports teams as well. They got a basketball team. And there was a story in the paper about how the coach forfeited a game because the students on the team needed to study for an upcoming exam. And they did an interview about this, and like they couldn't believe it. Like they canceled the whole game, and the coach's response was golden. I'll never forget it. I read it in the paper. The coach was like, I mean, let's not act like they're really going to this school because they have aspirations for the NBA. I mean, they're playing on the basketball team, but they're not at this school to become basketball players. They're at this school to become lawyers and doctors and so forth and so on. That's what he said in the paper. That's what he said. You know where that comes from? Values, not conspiracy. Values. That's a fact. So if there's a lot of them in a certain industry, it's not because of some conspiracy. It's because that's what they send their kids to school for. So let's get back. So let's talk about the anti-Semitism, since all of that stuff is false. Here's why this little fella here, he sticks right up under me, and any little noise sets him off. I don't know what it is bothering him. Maybe I'm setting him off. But so hold on. Come here, buddy. Come here. Come here. All right. All right. Calm down. All right. So let's talk about anti-Semitism. Since there's a whole lot of argument about what's about anti-Semitism, what it is. I even see people defining the word. Well, a person that's Semitic is this, that, or the other, and completely missing the point. Completely missing the point. So let's deal with that. Let's deal with this whole notion of anti-Semitism. All right. Now, why is what Kanye said and what um, Kyrie said anti-Semitic? Since folk are confused about it, why is it anti-Semitic? Journey with me back in history so I can help you understand. Now, the word anti-Semitic is essentially really a a late a late 19th century terminology. What's my little sister calling me for? It's a late 19th century terminology, right? So, but the idea, and in fact, it was a German journalist that actually coined the term anti-Semitism somewhere in the late 19th century. So you're talking about 1880s or 1890s, somewhere around there, right? Now, um, anti-Semitism as a practice is ages old. I mean, you can go all the way back even to the Middle Ages, and what you found happening later in Germany was happening throughout Europe. So they were constantly being expelled. They were constantly being barred from working, not sold to, housing discrimination, um, job discrimination, and constantly being driven away from wherever they live, typically by propaganda. The propaganda always went like this: they're trying to take over, they're controlling this, and they're controlling that. Look around, and we won't have any place to live. It went so far. I mean, and this was all over Western and Eastern Europe, from Germany to Russia. And we're talking about Middle Ages, even Middle Ages, all the way through our modern period. You find this. This doesn't start with Hitler, doesn't start with Nazi Germany. This is ages old, the same kind of thing, literally, even making things up. Jews, kill Christian kids and drink their blood. Like literally in Palestine, that is a popular conspiracy that they have even till this day. And that you can find evidence of that all the way back in Russia from before the turn of the 20th century. That same kind of idea. They kidnap Christian kids and and drink their blood. They're cannibals, and they drink the blood of Christian babies and children and so forth and so on. All kinds of things, which constantly led to discrimination. So anytime historically false ideas about their seeming control over every area of life, every single time those kinds of things were said, it always led to outbreaks of violence, persecution, killing, and essentially um, uh, uh, the dispersion of Jewish people from their various settlements. That's a historical fact. So you would react the same way if that were your history also. You're talking about well over 1,000 years of history of that kind of thing and that kind of end result. It is not okay, and I'm gonna deal with racism too. Don't worry about it. I'm even handed. It's not okay to invent falsehoods about Jews because it always leads to them being affected violently. It always has historically. And then one of the worst kinds of things that is also done. Uh, Jeez. Hold on one second. My sister. Okay. Uh, so one of the worst things that's also done in response to that is to then turn around and deny the historical reality of their disenfranchisement or the things that happened to them. To then turn around and say those things never happened. They actually make that up as a means of gaining even greater control. And so so that has also been a response. So let's take, for instance, um, the Holocaust. See, uh, Kyrie needs to be educated. If you don't know what you're talking about, don't talk about what you don't know. Get educated, especially when you know enough to know that a group of people have been ill affected by propaganda, right? So let's talk about, for instance, some of the false things. Here's now, okay, let me just stop real quick, plug this in. I do agree. I do agree that the Anti Defamation League ought to have something to say to Amazon about even platforming the documentary. Because, I mean, if the documentary is anti Semitic, and it is, the Anti Defamation League ought to have something to say to Amazon about streaming it, not just to Kyrie. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. I've not seen where they've made any statements to, and so I want to say that they need to. They need to, because if the video's all this and all that, then the platform hosting it must also be held accountable for it, and any company that has sponsored it needs to be held accountable for it as well. So they need to be more consistent and even-handed with their condemnation of it, not just from a Kyrie standpoint. Now, that doesn't take Kyrie off the hook. They definitely need to do that. They need to be called out on that if they have not already. But here's the point. Here's the thing that I want to say about that. In that documentary, Hebrews to Negroes, not only do they falsely claim that West African blacks are the true Israelites, which is a false claim. Doesn't matter how many so-called evidences they have. The fact of the matter is that they're building all of that off of pseudo scholarship. I don't even have the time to get into all of that. That's a whole nother video. You know, Adam Kessler and all of these different kinds of pseudo scholarships that they are using to advance this whole idea that the Ashkenazi Jews are fake Jews. That's another false view of the video. That's not an opinion. That's not an opinion. That's false. But the video also claims that others, like the Sephardic Jews or the Mizrahi Jews, are not true Jews either. Right? So it also makes that kind of claim as well. So that is anti-Semitic. When you attempt to say that a group of people, and this has nothing to do with Jewish ethnicity, because Jewish genetic features and ethnicity in terms of how people look, how they look, could be varied depending upon where they settled in the world. So it doesn't mean that Jews can't be various shades of colors with different kinds of features, long noses, fat noses, whatever. That's not the conversation. The conversation is that part of that belief denies the Jewishness of various groups. That's historically and flagrantly false. and then turns around and attempts to appropriate an entire people's history and culture by claiming that they are the true Jews. That's false. So ain't nothing woke or right about Kanye or Kyrie claiming that they can't be anti-Semitic because we're the true Semites anyway. That is anti-Semitic because neither one of those jokers are Jewish unless they converted to Judaism. Does anybody know that they converted to Judaism? No, they haven't. They're claiming ethnically that they are and their people, West Africans, our ancestors, and the descendants of African slaves, us, that we are the true Jews, we're the true Hebrews, the true Israelites. That's not true. There's no truth in that at all. None. So it is anti-Semitic because not only does it attempt to erase an entire people's history and culture by saying that they're fake and they're the synagogue of Satan. If that's not anti-Semitism, then you need to learn what anti-Semitism is. The term was coined to describe persecution against Jews. I know they're not the only Semites, but that's not why the term was coined. It was coined particularly to describe the historical phenomenon that has gone on for over 1,000 years of Jewish persecution. So it doesn't matter whether an Arab is technically a Semite or whatever. The term itself was coined to describe the phenomenon of Jewish hatred, persecution, so forth and so on. And included in that are the false tropes, conspiracy theories, and narratives exactly like what is stated in that video and exactly like what came out of Kanye's mouth. So the fact of the matter is that it doesn't do us any good. See, in our community, we're already pushing back against pseudo wokeism anyway, right? And when I say pseudo wokeism, I'm talking about this pseudo spirituality and all these other false historical narratives that are usually aimed against Christianity. Well, if you haven't already, shameless plug, go check out the documentary Unspoken. You want to see a documentary? Don't go look at Hebrews to Negroes. Go buy Unspoken, because we talk about how a lot of those false ideas that we see floating around in our community, conspiracy theories, Constantine invented the Bible at the Council of Nicaea. That's a conspiracy theory. That stuff is already robbing us. So it's not helpful for a segment of our people. And the more popular people, like athletes and entertainers, jump on that bandwagon, well, that false idea starts spreading even more. That's the last thing we need, is for more false ideas to be spread as truth through the Black community. If we haven't learned anything about our own plight and our own experience with racism, not just here in the US, but also in South Africa, in South America, and many other places in the world, we ought to be the last people jumping on board with white supremacists whose idea it's always been to persecute Jewish people. So it's interesting to me that in pseudo scholarship and pseudo woke conscious community, they're always building on the ideas of white pseudo scholars and white pseudo historians. It's interesting how they do that. And what's interesting is that even these ideas come from those same people. So in reality, we're picking up a false narrative and then passing it around in our community like it's the truth. The fact of the matter is that we have a very similar kind of history and plight. Propaganda was also used throughout our history here in America. You look at after the Civil War, during the period of Reconstruction around this country, and you'll find Google this if you haven't. Uh, um, Red Week, Red Week. Google that. Talks about this period in 1 week of tens of thousands of African Americans from Tulsa to DC and all the way down south who were displaced, killed, lynched, um, businesses, homes burned, and all kinds of things in a matter of 1 week because of white propaganda. You already know about Rosewood. You know about Tulsa, Oklahoma, Greenwood. What do you know about Wilmington, North Carolina? Did you know that in the 1890s, Wilmington had not only a black mayor, the state of North Carolina had a representative in Congress. The town had black thriving businesses, black burgeoning middle class. That's where the word bourgeois comes from. As we say bougie or bourgeois, it means middle class. Had a thriving middle class, so forth and so on. Whites started putting in newspapers. Blacks are taking over. They own land. They want to own businesses and own land so they can sleep with white women. Literally created a coup, openly killing black people, stopping them from voting, shooting them on the spot at the polls. Then went up into the state capitol and literally at gunpoint took over, ran the governor, the mayor, everybody, all the black people out of town, burned their homes down, killed many of them, and then voted in their own governor, their own mayors, elected all white people, and then changed all of the laws, making it possible for black people to even be registered as legal voters by creating literacy tests and poll taxes and all kinds of things. And they use propaganda to do it. Right here in Georgia, not too far from where I am, literally not too far. What's the name of this? Trying to remember the name of this town. Trying to remember the name of this town here. What's the name of this town? Right here in Georgia. Forsyth County. Forsyth County. Right in the 1920s. Town had maybe about 1,100 black people. In one night, a white mob ran all black people out of town, took their homes, took their land, so forth and so on, all through propaganda. Till this day, it's still one of the least desegregated areas of Georgia. Some black people are just kind of starting to move in. Oprah did a special maybe about 20 years ago there, and whites could be seen there calling her the N-word and all kinds of stuff. 20 years ago. It made up of what you call sundown towns. These are towns where, just like the name says, when the sun goes down, black people had not better be caught outside walking around. We got too much of a shared history of the same kind of thing than to be joining the chorus and the choir with conspiracy theory. This don't have nothing to do with, oh, watch out, say something about the Jews and it's your head. Say something about black people. No. That is a white supremacist idea. That doesn't come from us. That comes from them. That comes from white supremacy. White supremacists historically put Jews in ghettos the same way they did our people when they moved up during the Great Migration from 1910 to 1970, stuffed black people in ghettos all across the Northeast and in the Midwest. Warsaw, Poland, Germany, this, that, and the other. That's where the word came from. The word ghetto is a Jewish word. That's where the word comes from. Look it up. That's where the word comes from. So we have no business doing that. No business at all. Listen, further, we have no business listening to Louis Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan is a heretic, leading tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of black people to hell with him. Just putting it straight. He's no scholar. And in reality, let's just talk about civil rights. Tell me what Louis Farrakhan has done for black people in the United States. I will wait. Since y'all seem to think he's some champion for black justice. I can tell you what the black church has done. But what really has the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan really done for black people in the United States? Tell me, because I will wait. I got time. Type it in the chat. Let's talk. What have they done? Since he's some drum major for justice and some champion for the truth. And I don't know nobody that speaks the truth like Louis Farrakhan. That's a lie too. It's a myth that keeps getting told over and over and over and over. But rather than talking, tell me what he really did for black people. Tell me what he really did for black people. I don't know what he did for black people even in Chicago. Forget the rest of the country. What has he done for black people in Chicago? What stands in the black community on the South Side or on the West Side for black people other than their own buildings? But how do their buildings really impact economic development, economic uplift, or any of that in the black communities in Chicago? I will wait. Oh, they got a Supreme Fish restaurant. Well, there's a lot of places to eat. That's good. Okay, you got a restaurant that black people can go in and eat. That's if they even want that kind of food. But for the most part, what I'm saying is we've got to stop acting like he's got some truth. Because all Louis Farrakhan does is literally share the same kind of conspiracy theories about Jewish people that we find throughout history, such as the Holocaust was exaggerated. 6 million people didn't really die in Germany. They made that number up, and all kinds of things like that. You'll find that kind of stuff, right? And if one of the ways you know that I'm telling the truth is that, again, with this whole pseudo scholarship thing, you'll notice that every one of these groups always push this book. It's called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This book is replete. It was written in Germany somewhere around the 40s. This text is replete with all of the worst Jewish tropes and lies and myths and all kinds of things. And you'll find the Nation of Islam pushing it. You'll find this video pushing it. You'll find all of these so-called pseudo woke folk that are always talking about evil Zionists and all this other stuff. You'll always find them referencing these books. There's always a series or a set of books that they love to quote from. When you go behind who wrote these books, it's always anti-Semitic or white supremacist, white people who have invented these ideas that black people turn around and buy into. I'm 100% right about what I'm saying. I'm 100% right about what I'm saying. So you got all of this false teaching in the black community about spirituality and revisionist history and this, that, or the other, whether it's Comedicism, whether it's so-called Black Hebrew Israelism, whether it's Nation of Islam, 5% Nation of Gods and Earths, the Nuwapians, whether it's the Moorish Science Temple, or any of these groups and anything in between that. When you look at the kind of literature that they produce, the ideas that they have borrowed come from white pseudo historians, pseudo scholars, so forth and so on. And again, check out the Unspoken documentary because we get into all of that. Dr. Ben ain't no doctor. He didn't even have real had no real education. But you hear, oh, Dr. Ben said, Dr. Ben said. Yeah. Yeah. Same thing. So, and then where do they get all their ideas from? Some of these very same books and some of these very same people. White architects of anti-Semitic and racist thinking. And then we turn around and buy it and then regurgitate it in our community and try and pass it off like it's the truth and you got to wake up to this. Here's what you're really waking up to. Racism. The very same ideas that are aimed at Jews are also aimed at black people in America. The very same tropes. Yeah. So we've got to be careful about that. But you got people literally going around talking about, because they say it in this video. They invented this whole number about 6 million Jews being killed. They created that, and essentially, America knew the truth. America knows the truth about who the true Jews are. Even Adolf Hitler knew the truth that the Africans were the true Hebrews and this, that, or the other, and all of this stuff about they invented this number and so forth and so on. But no, the number wasn't invented. Only somebody ignorant would even make that kind of statement. Yeah. So if you want to do your research, as they say, look up the Nuremberg proceedings. This was essentially 6 months after the fall of the Nazi regime, the Third Reich, Hitler. Essentially 6 months after that, they started these proceedings in order to not only prosecute surviving Nazi participants, but to also carefully document exactly what the Nazis did. So that, and this is the truth, this is what they say in those proceedings. If we don't carefully document what happened here, it is so incredible in terms of the disaster, and I say that in a negative way, that if it is not documented, nobody is going to believe that this actually took place. That is how incredulous and incredible the whole Holocaust thing was. What they did was so horrific that in the Nuremberg proceedings, they said if this is not carefully documented with evidence, later in history, when this is discussed, nobody will believe that something that horrific could have ever possibly been pulled off. That was part of the reason that they were so meticulous in the way that they went about finding facts to support to document the evidence of what the Nazis did. They had greater than 16 teams of researchers, whether they were historians, scientists, so forth and so on, over 16 teams, and they collected literally hundreds of thousands of pieces of evidence. Not word of mouth, this, that, or the other. The documentation and the writings of the Germans themselves, as they documented, 90,000 people got killed today in this camp, or 10,000 were killed. We put them in the gas, their own writings, not to mention the bodies, but their own documented writings about where they killed them, how they killed them, what they used to kill them: gas cars, gas chambers, firing squad, literally incinerating ovens. And then for somebody to put up a link to a video that would say that Yad Vashem, Shoah, never occurred, never took place. That's horrific. I couldn't be greater offended. I couldn't be more offended than if somebody said that the transatlantic slave trade didn't happen. And it really wasn't really no tens of thousands of millions. There may be a couple hundred Africans that were enslaved at best. No. Listen, Kanye was wrong and Kyrie was wrong. Oh, he just put up a link. Yeah. A link to a very, very, very anti-Semitic video, which means that's endorsement. Let me help you on that. When you share misinformation, whether you agree with it or not, when you share it, thank you, love you. Good night. Good night, love you. All right. When you share it, it is as though you are endorsing it, unless you make some sort of disclaimer. I'm putting this out there for educational purposes only. I don't agree with this stuff. And you say, well, I agree with some of it, but I don't agree with other parts. Well, what parts don't you agree with? It's devastating. And like I said, there's a 1,000-year history of that same thing happening, which has always resulted in violence and killing and displacement, economic, all kinds of the worst kind of things for that community. So they should react the way that they do, the way that they do. They absolutely should. Yeah, they absolutely should. So, yeah, it's anti-Semitic. It ain't no conspiracy to silence the black voice, nothing. No. Get off that bandwagon. Get off that bandwagon. Because we're already fighting that same false idea on the apologetic front. They don't need help from the Christian community thinking that it's a whole nother kind of issue. See, if you don't learn anything today, learn this. This is exactly why false doctrine is dangerous. It not only spiritually imperils you, it has sociological, anthropological, psychological, and economic impact as well. Mental, emotional, you name it. What happened last year sometime? Nick Cannon was on social media. That whole, standing outside the bodega, street philosophizing with Professor Griff. What happened? Well, he almost lost his whole Wild and Out program and all of his endorsements. Why? Because the stuff he was saying was not true. Well, who's Professor Griff? Well, Professor Griff comes out of the 5% nation of gods and earths, who have bought into all of these false ideas about who the Jews are and all this other stuff. No, it ain't field day on the black man. It's just that we just need to admit that a good part of our community has bought into a whole lot of false conspiracy theories and false doctrine, revisionist history, and a whole lot of stuff. And historically, that stuff has not done us any good. It is not helpful at all for you to believe that you are the descendant of the lost tribe of Shabazz in the wilderness of America. Wasn't no Shabazz. Wasn't no lost tribe, God tribe of Shabazz. Wasn't no big head scientist named Yakub. How's that helpful to you? I can tell you, not only is it not helpful, it's harmful to lie to black people about their ethnicity, about their history, to literally invent something and say, here's your history. It's harmful. You did not live on the moon 66 trillion years ago. We were not a race of giants, according to the Nuwapians and all this other stuff. Fact of the matter is that we just have too many people who are willing to listen to the Louis Farrakhan's and the Polites the young pharaohs and the Shaka Amoses of the world, and too many people willing to listen to those kind of people. The black Hebrew Israelites with all their jacking up of scripture and their historical revisionism and all kinds of other stuff. Oh, it's getting popular. We're taking over. Just because something's getting popular doesn't make it more true. And the more we see popular people embracing it, the more it turns. We just live in that kind of culture where people are highly influenced by whatever pop culture is doing. And so now people are starting to think, oh, folk are waking up. Even Kanye, Kanye was right. No, he wasn't. Kanye was wrong. And so was Kyrie. And so was anybody else jumping on that bandwagon thinking that this is really, no, see, they were just really pulling the mask off of this. So Jewish people are trying, no. What you're doing now is repeating an ages old trope. I don't care what book you have. It's false. And the people who wrote it, when you go behind the scenes, if they're not black, even the black ones got those ideas from racist whites, mostly from Germany and Europe. Folk always talking about do your research. You do your research. Get off of YouTube, get in a library, and pull these up. Hundreds of thousands of books have been written to this end, peer-reviewed, published by reputable publishing companies that have written about all of this stuff that I am talking about. This is well-researched information. So, yeah. What else? What else? I can't think of anything. So let me do this. Let me go to sheath. I'm an hour and 19 in. Just coming up for air. All right, listen. What y'all got for me? I'm gonna do some Q&A real quick, and I'm gonna try my best to entertain some questions. If you have a question, type question in front of your question. If you got a pushback, put pushback in front of it, and let's have it. So we got the moderators out there; they're ready for you. But let's go. Let's hear from you. What do you guys have to say about it? None of the pseudo scholarship is peer reviewed. None of it. And the interesting thing is that there are critical reviews of all of that stuff. So, for instance, Adam Kessler's 13 Tribe, uh, that what scholars have to say, historians have to say about that. It's not like this has hasn't been debunked. Um, let me pull this up. Let me tell you what. Let me show you what scholars have to say about this 13th tribe. Hold on one second. I'm gonna pull it out real quick. Adam Kessler. Let me show you what they have to say about him. Watch this. Pull it up. Let me pull this up real quick. Real fast. Here we go. Right. So he started what's called the one that put forth this idea called the Khazar theory, and that is that the Ashkenazis or the European, the so-called European Jews, who they think are fake, he put forth this idea that they are truly European. In other words, their ancestors don't really come from Israel, that their origin is in Europe, and that really they are just the ancestors of the Khazars who were ruling in that area that converted to Judaism. So they are not Jews ethnically. They don't come from Israel. They are actually the Khazars and the descendants of the Khazars who actually converted to Judaism. That's the theory that Kessler put forth in the 13th tribe. This has been debunked a gazillion times by historical scholars. Michael Scammell, in his biography on Kessler, stated was almost entirely hypothetical and based on the slenderest of circumstantial evidence. Shaul Stamfer, in the article, Did the Khazars Convert to Judaism? In Jewish Social Studies, Volume 19, Number 3, Spring Summer Edition 2013, on page 1 says this, and that's a peer-reviewed journal. Many of the most reliable contemporary texts that mention the Khazars say nothing about their conversion, nor is there any archaeological evidence for it. This leads to the conclusion that such a conversion never took place. Fred Astron, in his book Karaite Judaism and the Historical Understanding, stated that Kessler's theory was outlandish speculation and that the Khazar theory is widely held by scholars to be, watch this, page 275, ahistorical. So it is with all of the foolishness that they quote from. It's ahistorical. Is there anyone with an actual degree in a relevant field that advances the all blacks are Hebrews view? They really don't have. They really don't have real scholars in that field. They really don't. They really don't. And should they find one, the question really still is, what scholarship are they using? And what you end up finding is even they're using pseudo scholarship. Can you list your resources for research you're suggesting? I'm not understanding my resources for research that I don't understand the question. about my resources. You're talking about resources for the statements that I made tonight. I don't understand the question, but I'll say this: anything that I said tonight is researchable. So whether it's my resources or not, every claim that I made tonight can be researched throughout hundreds and thousands of journals, articles, and books. Everything I said about the Holocaust, everything I said about the Middle Ages, and the Jewish conspiracies and propaganda, all of that stuff is well documented. Is well documented. And so here's what I would prefer. I would prefer for all of the folk who are always so engaged in talking about doing research to actually do something for a change and then go actually get hold of the right information. I'm not going to do people's homework for them. Since you're such a researcher, not you, Benny, but since they're such researchers, then they need to be able to easily find this information because it's not only easily researchable, but it's also easily accessible. So they ought to go do some real homework. Pushback. Aren't Jewish people white? Who were the original Hebrew Israelites? So that's not a pushback. It's not a pushback at all. Nobody said all Jewish people are white. It's not. It doesn't mean that there aren't white Jewish people, just like it doesn't mean that there aren't black Jews and non-white and non-black. Because in case you don't know, non-white and non-black are also categories. People from the continent of Asia are not white or black. So there are Jews of every kind of ethnicity, including European white Jews, whose ancestry can all trace back to the area of Judea. The scientific evidence, genetic and DNA evidence, actually supports that. It actually supports that. Let me The largest genetic study on Jews conducted in 2013 by Wayne State University published their study in Human Biology, the official publication of the American Association of Anthropological Genetics, under the title No Evidence from Genome-Wide Data of a Khazar Origin for the Ashkenazi Jews, found that Ashkenazi Jews have no detectable Khazar origins and derive their ancestry from Middle Eastern and European populations. Harry Oster, in his book Legacy, A Genetic History of Jewish People, based on 20 years of genetic research conducted by him and many other scientists, concluded that all of the major Jewish groups, i.e. Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi, and Beta Israel in Ethiopia, share common origin and no contribution from the Khazars. It's pseudo scholarship because it is pseudo scholarship. And if you knew who the pseudo scholars were, and if you knew what the arguments were against it, then you'd already know that. We don't have time. Like I said, here's what you need to do. Go download, go to Amazon and go download the documentary Unspoken. Contrary to the foolishness you find in Hidden Colors and in Hebrew the Negroes, these were real scholars in this with actual credentials in various fields. This was real researched information, historically, biblically, so forth and so on. And then you'll understand more about why this stuff is pseudo scholarship. Y'all's problem is that y'all believe it and y'all don't want to and y'all don't want to admit that you've bought into these lies that have actually been told to you by white racists. And then you go building up this whole thing about black this and black is great and black is, and all of that, all of the foundational information for all of the nonsense that you're talking has been foundationally taught by white racists, white pseudo historians, white pseudo scholars. And then you built your whole ideas about, look at how much Elijah Muhammad took from Charles Taze Russell, the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Almost all of his eschatology comes from Russell. And then who do you think um, um, Wallace Fard was? Who do you think Wallace Fard was? I'll tell you who he was. He wasn't the Messiah, wasn't the Mahdi, wasn't the Christ. He's a white man from Jasper, Texas. And every February, these guys are celebrating his birth. Our Savior has arrived, Savior's Day, while having the gall, the mitigated gall and audacity to say that Christianity is a white man's religion and that we worship a white Jesus. These the same people. Consequently, it was Fard who created the whole thing about Yakub, not Elijah. Wallace. He started that whole false cosmology about black people being in black people in America being the descendants of the lost God tribe of Shabazz. He started that. Every rock you turn over, a white man started all of these foolish lies that so-called woke black folk bought into, and then started cults and religions and all kinds of other things, claiming to know the truth about black identity. Listen, here's what you do. Send your best person to me, and we'll set up a debate. But you won't find them. You can't find them in the Nation. You can't find them in Comedicism. You can't find them. You can't. We done already ran them off. They don't exist. They talked all of that noise for years. And when black Christians who were informed actually started pushing back, we ran them all off the block. Somebody find Polite. Where's Polite today? How many times is Captain Tazariak gonna lose a debate? I mean, who y'all got? Who y'all got? Nation of Islam don't ever debate anybody because they know that they can't actually defend the indefensible. Their whole cosmology and history is indefensible. And it all boils down to this. This is what's evidence for them. The Master Fard Muhammad told the most honorable Elijah Muhammad these things. That's evidence for them. And yet we're deceived and brainwashed. Y'all better go sit down somewhere. Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Anytime you appropriate somebody's history and culture, it is identity theft. It's exactly what it is. No, he actually didn't. Ben-Ami, Ben Israel in Chicago actually didn't start the idea. I mean, you find the idea, uh, you know, in the late 19th century with Frank Cherry and William Crowley, so forth and so on, long before him. I mean, when did he even leave Chicago and do Aliyah to Israel? I think it was like in the 70s. So yeah, he didn't start the idea. See, again, that's a ridiculous question. Where are the real Jewish people today? They're everywhere. Like, how many times do we need to say this? They are no particular color. they have no particular genetic features. Everywhere that you find where Jewish people went in the diaspora, in the scattering, you find them actually also intermingling with those groups and therefore becoming part of those populations while maintaining their distinct Jewishness in heritage as well as in genetics. So every time we keep asking this question about where the real Jewish people today, like how many times do we need to answer the fact that they've been in Spain? That's what the Sephardic Jews are. They've been in Ethiopia. That's what Beta Israel is. They've been in the Middle East, outside of Judea. That's what Mizrahi Jews are. They were in Egypt, they were in Syria, Persia, you name it. And then the ones that went into Eastern Europe were called the Ashkenazi Jews. And then, and there are other groups. There are a bunch of other groups as well. So I don't understand the question, where are the real Jewish people today, as though their group is not heterogeneous. It's like we're not understanding that this is, that ethnically this is a very diverse group of people. They're not just one little group of people. And again, nobody said that there are no black Jews. Like, how many times do I need to say that? The fact of the matter is that the black people that came from Ghana and Mali and Congo, Cameroon, Nigeria, West Africa were not Jewish. They were not Hebrew. They were not Israelites. They were West African. And all of their DNA points to ancestors that come from there, not from Israel. So it ain't that it can't be true, it's that it's not. West Africans are not Jewish, are not Hebrews, no matter who keeps saying it or how loud they say it. Scripture plainly tells us that the Israelites were scattered all over the earth. So, what is the reason that some people keep falsely claiming that they all went to West Africa? Even if you might have found some that went to, even if you found some that went to West Africa, that doesn't mean an entire group of them migrated to West Africa. And it doesn't make the West Africans Jewish. it just, you know, yeah. Again, uh, revisionist history. Revisionist history. Actual history, whoever utilitarian is, I guarantee you, you don't have a degree in history. Guarantee you that. Guarantee you, you sat in nobody's class. I guarantee you, you don't even have an associate's in history. And here you are going against the majority consensus of actual historians that say there is no history supporting the idea that the Khazars converted to Judaism. So the whole idea is false, and the people who propagated it were pseudo historians. That's what I'm saying. It's folk like you who sit around continuing to say it in spite of the fact that there's no evidence to support it. See, again, um, no evidence to say that the Israelites are black is a stupid statement. It's a stupid statement because again, nobody said that they are not black Israelites. But to say that they are black, hence, if they aren't black, then they aren't Israelites, is patently and egregiously false. And it's just time out for folk like y'all to stop pushing these kinds of false narratives. Not a single one of y'all are learned. You speak a made up, what do they call it? Lashawam Kadash, fake Hebrew. It's like pig Latin or something. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Not a single one of y'all are scholars in anything that you're talking about. Yet y'all in here acting like you're all the experts. Please. Yeah. So it really gets back to that at the end of the day, what we find with the Black Hebrew Israelites is really what we find with all of these cults. They're all claiming to have the true identity of Black people in America. If you're Noble Drew Ali, then we were Moors or even Muslims or even Hebrews. He would often say all three of them. If you're Wallace Farr, then we're really Asiatic Black people who our ancestors were part of this God tribe of Shabazz that migrated into what they call West Asia, that's Africa, and then ultimately lost our identity, became enslaved, and here, hence, they're the lost found nation, lost the lost found nation of Islam, the lost tribe of Shabazz in the wilderness of America. That's who they want you to believe. Clarence X or Father Allah wants you to believe that you're really just God. You're God. That your arm, leg, arm, and head spells Allah, meaning that, I mean, it doesn't work in other languages, but see how convenient that is? That proves that we're really gods. That's who our identity is supposed to be. We're really the true gods. The you know, the gods and the earths. We gave birth to all civilization. Everything comes from us. The Nuwapians, well, we really were a race of giants, architects and engineers and warriors and so forth and so on. And we're really the descendants of the Anakim. You know, lived out of space and then came here. You know, all these groups got all these ideas about who our true identity. But you know, I will say this to be fair: Black Hebrew Israelism is just another side of Anglo British Israelism, which says the same thing, that white Europeans are the true Jews. Same foolishness. It's the same thing, with all the same pseudo history and pseudo scholarship to support that whole thing. Same thing, just on a different side. And there were churches teaching that, and still are. It's false though. Yeah. So yeah, we're winding down. We're winding down. What else we got? There we go. Unspoken documentary. Don't spend $45 to see that foolishness. Spend $7. Unspoken documentary. Copy this down. You can get it on Amazon, or you can even go to the website unspokenmovie.com and watch it via Vimeo. But best way to do it is right there at Amazon.com. Anybody can do that right in your browser. Go see, check this documentary out. Everybody on here needs to see this. You don't need to see hidden colors. You don't need to see Hebrews, the Negroes. You don't need to see that foolishness. You need to see this right here. This is what you need to see. This is what you need to sit down and watch. Don't tell me about how long it is, because it definitely ain't longer than that Hebrews, the Negroes foolishness. That thing is longer than Aretha Franklin's funeral. And it's full of lies. What else? What else? What else? Yeah. All right. So I think this just about wraps it up for me. But again, if there's any pushbacks, any final questions, I'm looking. Sorry about that. These glasses, my prescriptions are down here. So in order to read, I got to do this. My bad. Yeah. And that whole thing right there is pseudo history as well. That whole notion about what Greek historians say, this, that, or the other. If I had the time, I'll bring that out and explain how that's also a lie as well. No. The Greeks were black, everybody was black, and all this other stuff. No, no. Weren't the original Hebrews who became Israelites dark skinned? See, here's the thing. Being dark skinned doesn't make you a black person. It doesn't make you black. When we say black, we're really talking about people from Africa. That's what we're talking about. And not only is that what we're talking about, historically, when you read books from antiquity, that's what they were talking about. What do you think the word Cush means? Dark skinned. From the land that we call Africa. What do you think Ethiopian means? Aethiops, burnt face. They were talking about people from that region. Now, does that mean that every non-black person had to be white, or every non-white person had to be black? No, that's dumb. And it's very narrow-minded American kind of thinking. Because you grew up in the town that only had blacks and whites, and anybody that didn't look black and white, you just called them Mexican or Puerto Rican. That's how ignorant some of y'all were. And some of y'all still are. Because America taught you to think like that. And so then you apply that same kind of thinking to world history and think that everybody not black must be white and everybody not white must be black. The whole continent of Asia was mostly non-white. Now, doesn't mean that there weren't any whites in Asia, and it doesn't mean that there were no blacks in Asia. But it was non-white and non-black for the most part. Syrians, the Persians, which covers all that area of Iran, Iraq, so forth and so on, the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. And sure, you had white-skinned people, but that weren't European white, though. Muhammad was from the Quraysh tribe, and he bragged about his white skin every chance he got, but he wasn't really a European. It's from Saudi Arabia, but his skin was white. But he wouldn't be what you would consider a European Nordic white man. Most people on the continent of Asia had some darker colored skin. They were non-white people for the most part. Go to India. Most people in India have, first of all, they have a different hue from mine. It's a darker, almost a charcoalish, bronzish looking hue. Like I got a brown hue. They have a bronzish looking hue. It's even darker than mine. Even if their skin could be lighter, their hue is darker. But they're not African. And most people in India are dark like that. The ones that they put out because of their colorism usually would be the lighter skinned ones, but they're not European whites. No matter how light they are, they're not European whites. Folk need to just get educated. Egyptians were mostly not dark like the Ethiopians and those sub-Saharan Africans. But black people come in all kinds of hues and skin tones. All black people don't look like me. Got black people in my family with very light skin. Doesn't make them white. Y'all are foolish, y'all. Y'all are foolish. All right. I better get done. I'm coming up on 2 hours, but I needed to have this conversation so that we can put some things into perspective here about what anti-Semitism is and what it's not, and talk about this whole Hebrew Israelism stuff. Kyrie is wrong. Kyrie is confused. This fella is desperately searching for significance through identity. What Kyrie needs is the gospel. He doesn't need some Hebrew, some fake black Hebrew Israelite study. He doesn't need a final call. He doesn't need a watchtower or anything else. He needs to hear the gospel. And he needs proper discipleship and education historically. Well, it's not like black people can't possibly know where we come from. We can know. Even African Americans can know where we come from. I just did an ancestry thing. 87% West African. 87% West African. The other percentages, there was 8% English, and then the other 2 or 3% came from East Africa and South Africa. Right? And it ain't no way that I'm gonna look at the 8% and be like, man, I'm English, y'all. I'm English. 87% West African. 87%. Yeah. So I don't care what kind of haplogroup and all this other foolishness that they're talking about. These jokers come from West Africa just like me, from different parts. Their ancestors come from West Africa no differently. They're not Hebrew Israelites. They're not Judahites and all that other stuff. No. They're West Africans. And what is wrong with that? I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it for them. They're ashamed of that. Being West African is not glorious enough. So they have to pretend that their true history is what is recorded about the biblical people known as the Jews or the Israelites in scripture. Because they're ashamed of their West African heritage. No. Our people just came to West Africa, but we're not really Africans. Yeah. Told you, they're really prejudiced against their own people. Been taught to hate themselves. That's their problem. So-called black Hebrew Israelites hate themselves. They all hate themselves. And the Nation of Islam, they hate themselves too. That's why every one of their leaders has got to be light-skinned with slick hair. Because they hate themselves. They're not Pan-Africanists. They're not even pro-Africa. Y'all be listening to the wrong people. These people hate who they are. And that's why they support revisionist history and pseudo-history and false identities about who black people are. Because they can't accept who we really are. And the problem with that is, even at the end of the day, even if you were an Israelite, what standing would that give you before God? None. You would be just like anybody else, still in need of salvation, still in need of a Savior, who is Jesus the Christ, the true Israel. Yeah, so you wouldn't have any standing before God, even if you were a Jew. There's no ethnicity. No, the Bible says no flesh will glory in his presence. There's no ethnicity that will give you right standing before God. This whole notion of ethnic triumphalism is just, again, just racism. This whole idea that a person is spiritually righteous based on their ethnicity is the kind of thing that you found in white supremacy constructs. So now black people are buying into that and then reversing it? No. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. And I don't care what Kanye says. I don't care what Kyrie says. What's the rapper over there in Cali? What's his name? What's the fella's name? What's his name again? What's his name? Can't think of it. I can't even think of his name. I'll tell you in a second. Kendrick Lamar. There we go. Boom. I don't care what Kendrick Lamar even says. Doesn't matter how popular a person is. Doesn't matter how popular they are. Black people from West Africa are not Israelites. Ain't nobody waking up. If that's what you believe, you're not woke. You're dead. You're spiritually dead. You ain't even sleep. You're dead. So that's all I got. I don't care what Amari Stoudemire. There you go. I don't care who's teaching it. Carmelo Anthony, I guess he don't know whether he's an Israelite or whether he's a 5%er. I don't care what Jay-Z said. I don't care what any of them say. Ice Cube, yeah, don't matter. All of a sudden, how is it that popularity equals authority? How is that? All of a sudden, that anybody that has a platform, anybody that's popular, suddenly if they say something, it's the truth because they're popular? They're supposed to be authorities, and then we're talking about how we're woke. Yeah. Now listen, somebody converts to Judaism, then hey, you know what? Then they're Jewish by virtue of conversion. I can't argue, but it's this notion that West Africans are Jewish or Hebrew, and that nobody else really are true Israelites, but us. Again, that's not just one falsehood, that's multiple falsehoods. Yeah, exactly. There we go. All right. I'm done. Said what I got. I said what I had to say. And think about it. Think about it. But we need to get off this conspiracy theory stuff. These guys were wrong. They were wrong, and they're not being done wrong. Now, is cancel culture real? Sure, absolutely. But it's a sword that cuts both ways. And I'm just not going to buy into and go along with the chorus talking about see, they're exposing how powerful the Jews are, and look at what's happened to them. The Jews are behind this. Now you sound like every other anti-Semitic person throughout history that said those same things that ultimately got Jews displaced and killed, and homes burned, businesses burned, and had them literally, racial cleansing and all kinds of other stuff. Now you're saying the same stuff that they've been saying. And this was long before the Holocaust. It didn't start with Hitler, and it definitely didn't end with him. So if you're a Christian, you need to stop from that. We're truth tellers. So cut that stuff out. All this about, folk are waking up. You see what's going on? You see what's going on. Do you see what's going on? Jump off of that, because it's not right. It's not right. It's not true. And all we're really doing is teaming up with the very same kind of people that we've been doing apologetics for in the first place. Now we're actually giving credibility to all of those same kind of false arguments. We don't need to do that. I'm not sure what you're saying, that you disagree with me strongly over Kyrie. I don't know what there is to disagree with it. And like I said, if you have a pushback, then put your pushback out there. But just saying I disagree with you is not an intelligent disagreement. That's what I'm on here for. Why do you disagree? Because there wasn't a single thing that I said that was wrong about Kyrie. Kyrie is not educated in any of the things that he talks about. He's not educated in science if he thinks that there's a flat earth. He's definitely not educated as to the history of Jews. He's not educated about the Bible. He's not educated about a lot of things that he attempts to talk about. And that's a problem, because when you spread misinformation, it is harmful to other people. They came from Asia. I said that like a dozen times tonight. That's where they originate from, the continent of Asia. And since that time, they have been in diasporic communities all over the world. Why is anti-Semitism bigger, it seems, than everyday racism? I don't think it's bigger than everyday racism. I don't think it's bigger than everyday racism at all. It's different than racism, but it's not bigger. And like I said at the very beginning of this, one of the reasons why there's not a similar, if not greater, response to racism is because, unlike Jewish communities, they're united about what anti-Semitism is, and they're united in their reactions to it. We are not, especially when it comes down to consumerism. So part of the reason why there's a different reaction to it is because there are different views about it in our own community. You don't have that in Jewish communities. They all agree with what anti-Semitism is and how it affects them. They're not walking around with false histories about what they experience, so forth and so on. But look at us. Look at how many people on here believe something false about our own history. That's why it seems bigger, is because we have gotten in bed with the racist by essentially picking up on their tropes, even retelling our own history in ways that they have constructed for us. Jewish people don't allow you to do that. So, no, it's no conspiracy about whether or not anti-Semitism, there's a greater response to it than there is to racism against blacks. So the part of the issue is our own reaction to racism. I'm not going to answer any more of your questions. Yeah, there we go. All right, I'm done, y'all. That's it. And folk can say they disagree, this, that, the other, but one thing they can't do is they can't prove their disagreement. They can say whatever they want to say. Some people are determined to believe lies and all kinds of other stuff. Be my guest. The fact of the matter is that Kyrie and Kanye were both wrong, and what they said was in fact anti-Semitic. Yeah. So if you're a Christian and you believe in the truth, then we've got to jump off those kind of trains. We got to jump off those kind of trains. And the last thing we need to be doing is, especially as Black people, Black Christians, Black people in general, we definitely need to jump off the train where we are joining our voices with people against the plight of another group of people whose plight has been similar to ours. It's not helpful, because all we're really doing is teaming up with some of the very same people who also hate us, and those are white supremacists. No, and you're going to really need to go back to the beginning, because I explained all of that piece at the very beginning. If you go to, if you take some time, you get a chance, I covered all of that. So definitely get that you were late to the discussion, but all that was covered at the very beginning of this conversation. All right, y'all, we're at the 2-hour mark. Appreciate it. Much love. Thank you for all of the people, the super chats tonight. And thanks for everybody that hung in there. I know it's late, but don't forget to set your clock back. Most of you don't have to do it, especially if you've got you know, a smartphone. It'll automatically do that for you. But be in somebody's church tomorrow, a good Bible believing, sound doctrine, gospel centered church. Be there tomorrow in worship. God bless you. Thanks again for joining this discussion tonight.